Every business owner needs an exit strategy. Want to find out why? You got to join us for this episode of the Inside BS Show. Hey now, I'm Dave Lorenzo, the godfather of growth. Here with me today is Nikki G, and we are talking about exit strategy. That's right, we're talking about why you as a business owner need an exit strategy, and if you're an advisor, why you need to share the exit strategy secrets we're going to give to you today with your clients. Thanks for joining us. It's great to have you here. Good morning, Nikki G. How are you?
Good morning, Dave. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, thank you. All right, here's what we're going to do today. We are going to cover the 7 questions that we get most often about exit planning. And we're going to do that so that you have a good foundational understanding of why we do what we do, why you do what you do, why we do what we do, and why business owners need us. So, Nikki G, question number 1, what is an exit strategy?
Great question, Dave. An exit strategy is having a planned approach as a business owner to transition out of the company. There are a number of ways to do that. Oftentimes we see the sale of a company, or we see a transition in the ownership shares of a company, or we may see a winding down depending upon what's going on with the business. But it's having a plan in advance and not allowing that to unfold as you are in an exit that's occurring at that time. So having a plan in place and making sure that there's a nice smooth transition. So what we don't want to see with an exit strategy is a bumpy road, right? You haven't planned for the exit and now everyone is adjusting as everything's unfolding. If, for example, you've announced your retirement abruptly or something has happened that has caused you to have to exit the business. Another important component of this for us, especially in Exit Success Lab, is driving up that business value. So having a plan in place, having it in place early allows us to drive enterprise value in that business years in advance of that exit and ensure that smooth transition. So Dave, let me ask you this. Well, we'll move to question number 2, which is really related to what I just discussed. Why is it important for everyone to have an exit strategy?
That's such a great question. So there are a couple of reasons why it's important for everyone to have an exit strategy. The first is for contingency planning purposes. So what's going to happen if you're the business owner? Let's say you're a sole practitioner first and foremost, or you're a solopreneur and maybe you have a team, but it's just you leading the charge. If you get sick, who's going to run the business? If you need to take time off to tend to a family member who's sick, who's going to run the business? If you want to go cruise around the world for 90 days, who's going to run the business? So contingency planning purposes is the first reason you need to have an exit strategy. The second reason you need to have an exit strategy is to maximize the value of your business. A business that can't run without you is a job. It is not a business. We've all heard the Michael Gerber E-Myth strategy of working on the business, not working in the business. And that's great. But what Nicola and I focus on with our clients is working over the business, treating the business like an investment. So if you don't have an exit strategy, your business can't be an investment because your business is dependent on you. What you need is a well thought out plan that's a roadmap for the change that's going to come, whether you like it or not, voluntary or involuntary. If you don't have an exit strategy, you're going to be forced at the end of the day to take less money or maybe even no money when it's time for you to wind down the business. So contingency planning is one reason. And the second reason is so that you can have the most options when you're ready to ride off into the sunset. And even if you don't want to ride off into the sunset, you need to have some sort of a plan in place so that that investment can keep paying dividends to you while you go do your thing cruising around the world. So let's get into this a little bit deeper. Nicola, talk a little bit about, if you will, contingency planning or planning for an unanticipated exit.
Sure. Oftentimes we see that unanticipated events can occur in a business, and it can immediately stop the business if the owner is responsible for the majority of the functions or other leadership is. So having that plan in place allows you to avoid those disruptions in the business and continues to build value for you. So for example, maybe the owner has a sudden illness, gets in an accident, or unfortunately has a sudden death. Now, when that happens, that's it. Business comes to a halt without a plan. So having a plan that incorporates, for example, having interim management to step in that knows what to do. So it's not only the people, but it's what do they do. So having a plan for operations so they know what they will be doing ensures that the business can continue to run as smoothly as possible given the disruption. Having that plan also helps you with your customers, with your employees, because when there is a disruption to the business, all of them are impacted. It's not just the leadership of the organization, it's everyone you're working with. So you don't want to have that business look like chaos is going on. And we can avoid that largely by having a plan in place. Of course, there'll be minimal disruptions, but you can largely avoid that by having that plan. Let's move from contingency to your actual exit plan. So let's talk about, Dave, like what are the 3 exit plans that a business owner should have in place?
The 3 mandatory exit plans that we make all our clients put in place really relate to what you were talking about when it came to contingency planning. So I like to look at an employee ownership option, a management buyout option, and a CEO replacement option. The employee buyout option for larger businesses, so businesses that probably have north of $5 million in EBITDA, or north of $5 million in pre-tax earnings, probably north of $10 million in annual revenue, you can look at an ESOP, an employee stock ownership plan. That's a great thing to have in place, a great contingency plan to have in place, because you can trigger it anytime you want. It can be triggered at an event that occurs where you need to get out as an owner in short order. So ESOPs, the challenge with them is they can be a little pricey. Hiring really good advisors, attorneys, trustees, getting everything in place, it can be a little bit expensive to set up front. So you probably need to be a larger business in order to have that. Now, there's another option called an employee ownership trust. And I've also done some really interesting things, particularly in the professional services space, with creating a pool of shares for employees to draw from, or from the partners to grant shares to employees, so that there is an employee ownership opportunity. That's a great thing to have in place because the employees can then take over ownership. It's a great retention tool, and the employees are vested. The employees' behavior reflects their overall investment in the firm, and it is a really great opportunity for them, and it's a good tool for you as an owner. The second contingency plan that we want to have in place, mandatory exit plan, is a management buyout. The reason that I talk to business owners as early as possible about a management buyout is because you will hire and select different people to bring into the ranks of your management based on the fact that these managers are someday going to be owners of the company. You're not going to hire, or you're less likely to hire, a manager who's just a temporary sort of stopgap, just keep the lights on type manager if you're counting on your management team hopefully to someday buy you out. You will be focused on bringing in people who you would consider more along the lines of partners or potential partners or future partners. So focusing on a management buyout, even if it's an unstated management buyout, so you don't have to tell them in advance, hey, one day all this will be yours. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. But having that management buyout option in place for you, with focusing on having that mindset in place, is a great way to prepare for the future. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hey, Dave, if all my managers were capable of owning the company, if I'm going to sell the company to my 5 key managers, I probably would have to pay that type of person a lot more. I'm not saying that every key manager in your company needs to be ownership material today if you're not planning for your exit for 10 or 15 years down the road. Start with your top 1 or 2 people. say to yourself, could I envision myself as I bring this person on board, eventually giving the keys to the company to this person? If the answer is yes, you got a good foundation, you got a good start. So your top salesperson, your top operations person, your top salesperson, your top finance person, your top operations person, and your top business development person, those people are the people who could be the foundation for a management buyout in the future. That's a great way to think about it. The third and final management strategy that we want to have in place for an exit plan, the third and final contingency strategy that we want to have in place for an exit plan, is what I call a CEO replacement strategy. Now, this is an in case of emergency break glass strategy. What it is it's a relationship that you or your HR person or a combination of you and your team leaders have with a recruiter, a headhunter, and that person is a specialist in sourcing CEO candidates or outsourcing temporary CEO candidates. In some industries, these firms may be called seekers, where they'll invest in the company and put a CEO in place. You need to have an option for someone in your company to go out and bring in a temporary or fractional CEO to run the company on a day-to-day basis while the management team or your spouse or whoever is whoever are your heirs will find someone to replace you to kind of shepherd the company along, or to put in place a sale so that the company can be guided toward the exit if you suddenly happen to pass away or are incapacitated. So again, that CEO replacement strategy is finding a fractional CEO, a temporary CEO, or a headhunter to bring in a fractional CEO or a temporary CEO, guided by the person who is going to inherit your shares should you become incapacitated or die. So employee buyout, management buyout, CEO replacement strategy, those are the three exit plans we want all business owners to have in place. And it could be as simple as having a book, a notebook with these plans written down in it, or it could be as complex as a formal written plan document with a copy in the hands of your corporate attorney, another copy in the hands of your exit planning attorney, and a third copy in the safe in your office. That's what you need to have in place right now. So if you can hear my voice right now, if you're watching this on video right now and you own a company, those three strategies should be in place today. If you don't have those three strategies in place, give me a call, give Nicola a call, because you got to get them in place right now. Nicola, you have any thoughts on that before we move on to the next question?
I think you did a great job of explaining that. I think so. Just to highlight, these are really the internal exit strategies that we focus on in our business. So we have both. We have internal and external exit strategies that we want business owners to be thinking about.
All right. So now let's touch on the three external sale options for a business, the three exit strategy options for a business that are external. And these are the three that we talk about the most. One of them, multiple of them, or all of them may be appropriate for you. Nicola, why don't you go into what the three external options for an exit strategy are for business owners?
So the first that we talk about in this community is a sale to a strategic. And what that simply means is a sale to a competitor, or it could be a company that just is interested in the business and will have synergies with it. There is an entire market that your business may be sold to because it has value to those particular companies, especially competitors. Oftentimes when we have these conversations, we see that, owners will just view the competitor as such, that it's just someone who's trying to eat away market share and take it from them. But oftentimes we see those competitors come around and approach those owners because they want to purchase the business, given that it could help them generate more revenue in their own business. So think of it as just finding an entire market where you will receive a higher value for that business because your business is particularly valuable to them. There's a value there that is not market wide. It is because that business will have some overlap with yours and will see additional value in it that the rest of the markets will not see. So that's option one. Option two for us is a private equity sale. Now I know what you're thinking. This is the gold standard. Every business owner wants to sell to private equity. We have this discussion all the time. It's can we get there? And I think there's a lot of folks that think that there's a significant amount of private equity sales occurring in the market, and that's not the case. So this option is a great option, but it's going to be one that is not as common. And the reason for that is because those companies are looking for very specific businesses to buy. It has to make sense for that particular firm. It's got to be in a space where they are building. For example, maybe you could be an add-on to another company and that they're putting together a group of companies, or you could be the platform to which the others are getting added on, in which case you would receive even higher value if you were the platform company. But private equity is very specific what they're looking for. There's certain industries that they focus on in particular, and that also works with the market. So it could be, for example, home services businesses that private equity firms are after. So they're looking for a group of those in the market, gobbling them up. Depends again on market factors and what they're after. But that sale to private equity certainly is going to take a strong look at, what your key drivers are and how well they're performing. We're going to get into that in a little bit more detail, so I won't dive too far into that, but that's going to matter for private equity. They are really going to scrutinize every aspect of your business to see, are you operating in a way that is going to make sense for them? And if you are, then that your business may be considered for that sale. And if not, then maybe it still will be, but there's going to be significant discounts associated with it if it is not on par with what they are looking for and all these different drivers. And then finally, the third sale option that we look at for an external sale is going to be a public offering. So an initial public offering or taking the company public. That is not for a lot of companies. I would say that's the least common option because there are a lot of factors at play there, whether the company even wants to consider going public, and also can the business allow for that to happen. Most of the times you're looking at a really high growth company that's going to be even considering going public. If that is a consideration for your business, it is incredibly complex. There's a lot of regulation involved. There's going to be a lot of legal work involved. It's highly, highly complex to be able to take a company public. So not an option that most folks will be considering, but certainly one that we have to consider with the businesses that we work with. So again, those options are going to be strategic sale or sale to a competitor, a sale to private equity, or an initial public offering.
I feel like the IPO option was incredibly popular in the 80s and in the 90s before private equity really burst onto the scene and was focused on, grabbing companies and combining companies and doing those sorts of things. I actually was part of an IPO. One of the companies I worked for was part of an IPO. They went public and then they were immediately bought by Marriott right after they went public. The whole purpose of them going public was to make the purchase by Marriott International easier for them. And it was, the business at the time was, it was significant, but today it would have to be more significant. So kind of the rule of thumb to think about is if you want to think about an initial public offering, your business should probably be doing $75 or $100 million in annual revenue in order to even think about it. Even then, that would be kind of a small initial public offering. You're probably going to be pursued pretty heavily by private equity funds if you grow the business to that level. And their offers may be quite generous, probably more generous and slightly less onerous than an IPO. So my thought process is strategic sale or a sale to private equity. That's what most business owners are looking at. They have an eye toward. But to be candid with you, if you're doing $75, $100 million in annual revenue and you want to run your business like you're preparing for an IPO, a private equity sale will be, you'll be able to get through the due diligence period with a private equity sale. Those of you who are listening here, you're probably not running businesses of that size. So strategic sale, private equity sale, IPO, those are the three. All right, let's talk now, Nicola, about the 10 drivers of enterprise value. Because one of the questions we get all the time is, what are the 10 key drivers of enterprise value for any business? And people want to know how each of those kind of fits into exit strategy and exit planning. Why don't you take the first two and we'll go kind of 2 by 2 and cover each of these, just touching on the tops of the 10 drivers of enterprise value as an intro for our folks who are listening, the folks who are watching today.
Of course. And so to be clear, the 10 key drivers are those that we've identified in Exit Success Lab. So this is not, just a market 10 key drivers. These are our 10 key proprietary drivers that we've identified that we believe apply to any business in any industry and regardless of where it is in its life cycle. So the first one is there for a reason in place number 1, which is your diversity and quality of revenue streams. You hear us talk about this often, and we can't talk about it often enough, given how important it is for driving profitability and revenue in the business. When we say quality, we're looking at what's the quality of the customer base. And do we need to, for example, diversify that customer base because, for example, the business is too dependent upon a single customer or a single set of customers? And then we also look at diversifying the revenue. So diversifying the revenue in different ways, for example, like geographically, for example, by other businesses. So it's focusing on both aspects of that and making sure that your revenue is not coming from a single source, but you have multiple streams. And that revenue is recurring in the business so that you have predictability in the revenue stream. Second point we look at is leadership development and management succession. Making sure that you have a plan to develop the leaders that are already part of the organization and have a management succession plan is what is going to drive the growth, not only the growth of your business, but sustainability. So this is really kind of the core group that's going to keep that business where it is and moving forward. So it's important to have both in place. A plan to have leaders on the track to develop so you're investing in those employees. And for management, having a plan, having a succession plan in place, which is something else that we work on with respect to the second key driver. So Dave, let me turn it over to you for key drivers 3 and 4.
All right. Key driver number 3 is standard operating procedures. This is something that I like to beat the business owners over the head with. People need to have guidance for doing their jobs. If you don't have a plan in place for how to do every single task in your business, you're leaving money on the table. Start with the biggest tasks and narrow them down. Have the people in the organization write down step by step how they do the most important things that they do day in and day out. Then get granular, continue to develop and improve these standard operating procedures on a regular basis. Document them. Have them written and put them in, you can have them in binders in each department in your business. You can have them in the hard drive that is on site. You can have them in a file on the cloud. You should also have them in your knowledge management system. You should have these standard operating procedures in as many different places, saved and updated as regularly as possible, so that people coming in, whether it's new employees, new managers, or new ownership, can read through a standard operating procedure and have a guide to doing any job, any task, any role in the company. I can't stress enough how valuable these standard operating procedures are. It can add literally points to your bottom line. You can get more money for your business if you have standard operating procedures in place, because new management coming in will be able to look at them, read through them, and evaluate the people who are doing the work. Standard operating procedures are great for the ongoing managing and leading of your team, but they're also great for when you're ready to sell the business. So one of the top things, fastest ways to improve the value of the business is by documenting the standard operating procedures that are already in place. Number 4 is human resources best practices. So every business is a compilation of the talent of the people that work in that business. How you recruit, hire, retain, engage the talent that is part of your company it's critical to the success of your company overall. So your policies, your practices related to HR, that is the fuel that makes the company go. Who do you select? How do you select them? How do you find them? How do you onboard them? How do you make sure they stay engaged and they're successful? What's your performance appraisal process look like? What is your training process for your people? What's your training process for your managers? How do you determine who becomes a leader? All of these things are HR practices, plus all the admin aspects of your HR practices. You need to have these buttoned down. You need to have them nailed down. Now, there's a shortcut. If you're a smaller business or a mid-sized business, you can bring in a PEO. You can bring in a professional employer organization that will work with you on almost like a co ownership basis of your employees, and they will manage all the administrative aspects of your business for you. You still have to be a leader. You still have to engage and train your folks, and you still have to have policies and practices in place. So my advice to you is, when you grow to beyond 10 or 15 employees, look to bring on someone who is focused on employee engagement, employee recruiting, employee retention, and onboarding, even if you decide you want to have someone help you with the admin functions of your human resources best practices. No matter what you do, this is going to be an area that is scrutinized, that is poured over by someone who's looking to buy your business. So you better have these in shape in your company from day one. So those are the first four. Now for number 5, we're going to turn it back over to Nikki G for something that's near and dear to her heart.
That's right, legal risk and exposure. So there's 2 aspects of this. So the first, of course, is identifying and minimizing the areas of risk and exposure in your business, because you want to avoid disruptions and expense. So are you in compliance with all the laws that are applicable to your business? Are you reviewing regular policies and procedures that are in place? Hopefully you have policies and procedures in place. Are you keeping up with changes in the law and making sure that the business is in compliance with those? Because when you fall out, that's where you can become most vulnerable to disputes, lawsuits, and disruption inside of the company. And that's what's going to not only cost money for the business, but time at the C-suite level, the managerial level, the employee level. I mean, I've seen it all, and the last thing that you want is a lawsuit, because that's really where everything comes to a halt and time is being spent on that rather than keeping the business running. Now, the second aspect of this that I think is often overlooked and that we focus on is how this drives value for a business. So by the time you get to the due diligence phase, because you're ready to have a successful exit of the business, this is going to be heavily scrutinized. And anything that is a problem is going to be exposed there. For example, do you have pending lawsuits? Are there threatened lawsuits? Or are there just problems with the documents that you have in place? Maybe they're dated. Maybe you're not in compliance with some of those areas of the law that you should be. And that's going to cost a business owner a lot in due diligence, because you're going to have to go back and fix those issues. That sale is not going to go forward if there are legal issues associated with that business, because a buyer is not going to want to inherit the problems. So that's going to cost time, and certainly in terms of a setback for what the timeline is going to look like for that sale, and it's going to cost an investment to make sure you're correcting all of it. So taking care of these now and laying that foundation as you're moving forward in a business is going to save you a lot of time and expense in the long run and prepare for that successful exit. The next driver on our list, number 6, is brand reputation. Your brand is a powerful asset. That asset can have its own independent value when you're looking at the time of a sale, depending upon how strong that brand has become. And outside of its value, it has value with your customers. When you have a strong brand, people want to do business with the company. They start to recognize the company. There becomes a familiarity and level of trust in doing business with the company associated with that brand. So using that brand allows you to engage with your customers and be able to retain customers in the long term. So that's why we focus on brand reputation and developing a powerful brand, because, and again, adding value to that business by the time you're at a successful exit, and helping you with that customer base and making sure that you're developing credibility with your customers and have that loyalty so that they stay with you in the long term. Dave, let me turn it over to you for 7 and 8.
All right. Numero 7. Number 7 is sales and marketing systems and support. Where is the money going to come from? If you don't know, your business isn't worth Well, it isn't worth anything. You need to have a system and a process in place for identifying, finding, attracting, closing, and onboarding new customers. So your sales and marketing systems and support is critical. You need to be able to highlight the customer journey all the way through from the time when you suspect they might be a customer to you to when you convert them into a prospect. They raise their hand and say, yes, I'm interested in what you have to say. I want to hear more, to the time when the prospect converts into a client, to the time when a client becomes a repeat client, until the point where you can measure client lifetime value. All of that is in your sales and marketing systems and support. If you don't have systems in place, your business is not saleable. We need to know where your next dollar is going to come from. Sales and marketing systems, that's what will help you be able to point to that. That's what's essential for you to have in place. And the better your sales and marketing systems are, the more money you'll get for your business overall. Number 8 is market, industry, and supplier conditions. Can you imagine if you had a business that was dependent on one supplier to provide you with raw material to make your product or your service, and then that supplier, for whatever reason, had a disruption? They closed down, they went bankrupt, they went out of business. There was a pandemic where they're located and they were no longer able to produce for you. Your business would come to a halt until you could find another supplier. So analyzing market, industry, and supplier conditions is critical, and you need to be able to adapt to the market dynamics that are constantly changing. Having a plan in place, a primary supplier and a secondary supplier, a market where you're doing business and a secondary market where you're also doing business, industry focuses where your clients are concentrated, and secondary industry focuses. Having alternatives in place is a really good thing. The more diverse your market penetration is, the more diverse your customer concentration is, the more diverse your suppliers and supply chain is, the better off your business is, the higher the value of your business. So we want to look at market, industry, and supplier conditions. Make sure that you're not concentrated in any one market. You're not dependent on any one supplier. You don't have any one industry that is providing you with all of your revenue. All right, Nikki G, bring it home for numbers 9 and 10 on the 10 drivers of enterprise value.
All right, number 9, financial conditions and reporting. So here, this is the health of your business. Your books show the health of your business. It is incredibly important for you to make sure that those books are done correctly from an accounting perspective, and everything there is nice and neat. That is often the first stop in due diligence, is let's look at what the financials show. Why? Because we need to see how healthy this company is, how profitable this company is, and what's been going on. And oftentimes, we have a partner we work with in our community, as you all know, Sandrowski Corporate Advisors, and they work with a lot of businesses, including very sophisticated ones, whose books are a mess. And it takes time to clean all of that up. It's often surprising because you assume that more sophisticated businesses, larger businesses, have all of that in order. That's not always the case. And it takes a long time to be able to go back and to clean up those books to make them to the point where they're nice and neat. They show that the company is nice and healthy by the time you get to due diligence. So very important to be focusing on the books, making sure they're done right, making sure they're done in the right accounting standards too. So for example, if you end up in a private sale of business, there's going to be a quality of earnings report that's done. And that's going to look at, what accounting have you used? Have you used GAAP principles for accounting to make sure that your business is in compliance with those? And if not, then you'll likely have to go back and use that. So again, just making sure those books are nice and in order is going to be an early step for you. So make sure that's done. And then finally, driver number 10, the one that should be keeping every business owner up at night, which is cybersecurity risk and information technology systems. This is all about protecting your digital assets. So are you protecting your data properly? Are you protecting the systems in your company properly? There's always going to be cyber threats out there. For example, we are all susceptible to phishing, to malware, the things that are out there every day trying to get our attention and to get us to click on that link are going to happen. It's just, do we have that plan in place to best protect ourselves against when that does happen? So we look at, just high level, we look at 3 different areas when we're dealing with cybersecurity. We're looking at the human aspect of it, which is the people. Have you provided education and training for those in your company? Do you have policies in place that are going to help you implement the guidelines that you've identified to use to protect that information for the company? Second, we look at the processes. What are you doing in order to make sure that's protected? And then finally, the tools. Like, what specific tools are you using to help carry out those processes and to make sure that you are protected? So an area of business that should be keeping everyone up at night and that we ought to focus on because of how important it is. And you've got to have a plan in place. That's the biggest takeaway here, is having a plan in place and having a multi-layered defense system, really. Because it can't just be one thing. It's not simply, well, we made really strong protected passwords or we have a firewall. It's a holistic system that really works together to protect that business, and it's got to be layered. Because if any one layer fails, you have multiple backups to help save you and to help save your information from being exposed or being lost altogether.
Great job. Really well said. Okay, so the final question is, how does a business owner determine which driver of enterprise value to focus on first? I will tell you that the best thing for you to do is to go through all 10 of these and prioritize them in order of exposure. So prioritize them in order of where you're most deficient. Rank them 1 through 10, and then next to each of the drivers, write the name of the person in your company who would be responsible for fixing, shoring up, or managing that key driver of enterprise value. Now, don't be panic stricken if you don't have a person in your company for every single one of these. This is the point where you call us and we will help you look through each of these drivers, and we can connect you with professionals who work in each of these areas. Nicola and I, we do some of our best work in 2 of those 10 areas, but if we're really busy, we may recommend other people to do the work in those areas anyway. So that's the reason why we've built the Exit Success Lab community, and that's the reason why the consultants that we work with are so important. We do not work in all of these areas. We may come in and do an overall audit, and that's the second point I want to make about this. If you're not sure where to start, you can call us. We'll come in and do an overall audit. It's very much like a strategic plan, which is also something that we do in Exit Success Lab. We'll look at all 10 of the drivers, and we will rank your exposure for you, and then we'll sit down with you and decide what you should start on and where you should start and who you should call. But the consultants that we work with are critical because they're the ones who help the clients fix each of these areas. Our focus is on helping business owners grow and helping business owners scale their business and helping them do so in a way that gives them the most options when they're ready to exit. So if you're listening to this podcast or if you're watching the show and you are concerned about growth and you're not at all worried about an exit, this is something you should be focusing on because it will help you grow faster and it will help you create a more valuable business. It will help you create better, stronger, more durable revenue streams that are predictable. If you're thinking about an exit, but it's 10 or 15 years down the road, that's the perfect time to call us. By the same token, if you're thinking about an exit in a year, you need to call us right away because there are some things we can do immediately to help increase the value. So determining which driver to focus on first really is dependent upon 3 things. Number 1, what your biggest needs are as a leader and where you think the biggest exposure is, what's keeping you up at night. Number 2, what your intention is for the business. Want to sell tomorrow? There's drivers that we can focus on that'll increase the value of your business from today to 6 months from today in a dramatic way. We can help you do that really, really quickly. If you don't want to sell immediately, then there are some longer term things we should be doing in addition to the shorter term things that we should be doing. So what your intention is, that's the second thing to think about as you determine which drivers you should focus on. And then number 3, the third thing you should think about is overall, what is the way that you can have the most impact on your business for you personally. After all, this is your business. What will make your life easier? If you're not planning to sell in the next 2 or 3 years and your growth is good and you're scaling your business and you're happy with your growth, but there are just some things that are bothering you. There's some things that you can't handle anymore. There are just some things that you don't want to do. Then maybe you should look at those key drivers of enterprise value and begin to put plans in place to make sure those are handled with or without you so that you can step away from them and you can have a positive impact on your well-being. So those are the 3 areas. What are your intentions for the business? What's the biggest vulnerability? What's keeping you up at night? And what would you like to have fixed so that you can step away from it in your business and we can put it on autopilot so it can run with your oversight but without you involved in the day-to-day. Nicole, you have anything to add before we close out?
I would like to emphasize something that's really critical to what we do in Exit Success Lab associated with these 10 key drivers, which is that we want to start looking at this with business owners as early as possible. We're not talking about just when you're upon an exit or you're just a couple years out. Yes, we can add value there, but that's often the last stop that you can, last exit you can take off the expressway to start adding some value. We want it to start at the beginning. We want to start at the beginning. Why? Because that helps us drive value over the lifetime of the business leading up to that point. That's really where you can maximize value. It gives us the time to assess all of these 10 areas, make sure that business is in top shape so that it achieves its highest value, achieves its highest multiple, and you have more options when you exit. So that's really important for us, is having that longer time frame, because that's really where we can make much more of a difference for a business. So it's thinking about it now. And we don't think about exit strategy or exit planning as already putting that plan in place, for a short timeline. It's putting it in place for the longevity of the business so that eventually when there is a change, and there will be, change is inevitable, that you're prepared for it and you're at a great place when it happens.
All right, that'll do it for this episode of the Inside BS Show. I'm Dave Lorenzo, the Godfather of Growth, and she is
Nikki G.
We'll see you back here again next week for another edition of our show. Until then, here's hoping you make a great living and live a great life.